So you should see something popping up about that. These presentations, and if we have the slides, we will make the slides available as in addition to the recording at a later time. If you have any questions or technical problems, please send me a note directly in the chat. I will be looking at that and hopefully helping you out if you can't hear or something else is going on. I just ask that you mute yourself and remain muted unless you have been called upon to speak. At the end of the day, we're going to be asking you to complete an evaluation of today's talk. And if you could just enter your name in the chat, this helps us kind of keep attendance of the different presentations. For this presentation, Marla will be helping Jay by monitoring the chat and taking questions. So thanks again for being part of it. And Jay, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Libby. I'm just really honored to have this opportunity to talk about the Healing Place, and just want to thank all the hard work that you and the rest of the staff putting the peer workforce conference together. I think it's pretty innovative and allowing everybody across the country to get involved, and I think that's pretty awesome. So thank you very much for all your hard work. The miracle on market. Well, the miracle on market happens to be the Healing Place, and so the book was published last August, last year. It took about 16 months for me to write it. And the reason that I wrote it is because, well, for about 20 years, everybody would come up to me and say, well, how did the Healing Place get started? And so I'd have to sit down and go ahead and start from scratch and talk about my history that led me, the ups and downs in my history that led me to a place in my life where I ended up involved in a homeless shelter. And so from then on, how that homeless shelter grew to what it is today. So the Healing Place is celebrating 32 years of success, and the Miracle on Market is really a two-part book. The first half of it's my journey through recovery to get to the turning point to get involved with a homeless shelter. And then the second half is more of a historical accounting of how the Healing Place started as a shelter and has grown to what it is today, which is provides addiction recovery services for 1,000 people every day in 3 locations here in Louisville and Campbellsville. Interestingly enough, I had a great publisher, and if you look at the book cover here, this is actually a photograph of the Healing Place taken from west to east heading toward the downtown skyline of Louisville. And the 2 buildings on the left side are part of the Healing Place, and the buildings on the right side are part of the Healing Place. So I thought it was pretty cool to have that kind of a cover for the book, and they did it in soft matte, so it's really great. And so we're the only recovery center on the west end of Louisville, if you're familiar with Louisville. And so just exactly what is the Healing Place? I say it's inpatient and outpatient addiction recovery program. And what I mean by that is it's flexible and it's expanded over time. The inpatient is really a residential 12-step recovery program, and we've expanded to meet the clients. For the residential program, those men and women have lost all their social supports. They don't have any housing. They've been separated from their family or friends and so forth. So the residential program is ideally suited for them. And we realize that there's a large majority of active alcoholics and addicts out there in the community that still have all their social supports of housing and job and family and so forth, but they're struggling with addiction. And so we've started an outpatient program to address that need. Both of those programs are all focused on a 12-step format. And the real key to both of the residential and the outpatient services is all about mutual help or peer-driven peer support. And that's what makes the whole model work. I say it's effective and it's efficient and it's replicable, featuring the social model, therapeutic community and peer-driven approach. Effective because it has a tremendous outcomes, and it's efficient because it's very low cost to operate. And we've taken a social model therapeutic community, modified it to address the needs of the current clients that we see today. And again, the peer-driven approach is absolutely essential to making this whole recovery program work, peer-to-peer. It's actually going back to the basics of 1935 when Dr. Bob and Bill realized that if they were going to stay sober, they really needed to reach out and help another suffering alcoholic or addict. And what they had to do was just to share their experience and strength and hope on how they've been able to change. And so we've just used that as our basic foundation for the entire model of the Healing Place and everything that the Healing Place gets involved with. So just a real brief history. In 1989, like I said, doctors from the Medical Society took a risk and decided they'd get involved in a community issue. And it just so happens that one of the major issues in Louisville at the time in 1989 was homeless men on the street. That was evident because back in 1970 through 1988, a Catholic priest was operating the only wet shelter in Louisville. And what I mean by that was there were 4 other shelters in Louisville, but if you were under the influence, you were not allowed to go, you were not admitted into their overnight shelter. And this Catholic priest took exception with that and decided he was going to start his own overnight shelter. And it was going to be a wet shelter, meaning that they could come in under the influence. And that was the 80-man homeless shelter. In 1989, the Catholic priest wanted to get into the business of providing transitional housing for women coming out of our Kentucky state penitentiary for women, providing them transitional housing. And he looked to the doctors and said, "Doctors, you need to get involved in something in this community." And the doctor said, "Well, how about let's work with the homeless shelter." And so the father deeded over all the property and gave the doctors their first year's annual operating revenue for operating the shelter. This was about, fast forward 2 years, I was getting ready to graduate with my social work degree. And you know how you have your own self-will ideas about what you want to do. And I went to Kent School and took the clinical track because I wanted to be a psychotherapist, giving psychotherapy for adults and from a Christian perspective. And I wanted to do it down in Elizabethtown and Radcliffe, just south of Louisville. But I tuition had to pay. And so these doctors that were operating this homeless shelter needed an executive director. And so I sent my resume there, and lo and behold, they decided to hire me. They figured that I could be very effective in probably running the shelter. They didn't know what I could do with a social work degree, but he said, "Well, we'll go ahead and let you run the shelter and see what happens." And so December of 1991, I took over and walked into the what was then called the Jefferson County Medical Society Outreach Program. I really didn't know what to do. I didn't have a lot of experience with welfare or homelessness. And so I just had my military experience of moving into a new unit and deciding what needed to be changed. So I figured I'd do a 30 days checking out how everything was being run, and looked at what needed to change. And what I realized is that I needed to really literally get rid of all the staff and start from scratch. And so that ended. As a result of that, I ended up actually living in the shelter for 2 weeks. That was a tremendous eye-opening experience. I was doing check-in and check-out for the overnight shelter. I was running to Kroger's to get a 50-pound bag of potatoes for the cooks. I was doing maintenance around the building. And in the meantime, I spent all my time really getting to know the men and really getting to know where they're coming from and what their needs were. And I realized that a significant percentage of these men were under the influence of alcohol and drugs. And I knew at this point I was 8 years sober, and I realized that they were never going to really be successful in getting off the street and having meaningful and productive lives if they continued to use alcohol and drugs. So I figured that's what we needed to start looking at, how we could create a program that would allow these men to find a way to get on the journey of recovery. And so we had the overnight shelter, and it was what I mean by low barrier access is that they could bring into the shelter all of their belongings and keep them with them in the sleeping area, as long as whatever was in their carry-on bag stayed in the bag for that night. And also emphasized to them that this was their safe place. If they created incidents of drug use, alcohol use, or created instances of getting into fights or something like that, the only recourse we had was to create a police state of a lot of checks and balances and rules. And we said that we didn't really want that, and they didn't want that. And I said that it's your responsibility to maintain the health and welfare of this overnight shelter. And so actually it turned out that they made that their safe place, their home. And they really, anytime there was evidence of someone using alcohol on premises, they would confront that individual and tell them to stop, because they didn't want to have the more restrictive rules and so forth. So that began the whole concept of they're brothers keepers, and they really need to take care of themselves, take care of each other. So that overnight shelter was our first outreach to the street, and we were able to, the Healing Place was able to create a safe place for these men to spend the night. And word went out on the streets, so that to the point where we were full every night, and even had to turn some away because we didn't have enough beds for everyone that wanted to come to the Healing Place. The second thing was that there were two buildings across the street from the main campus, from the overnight shelter, that needed to be renovated. The previous director had set aside money to do a renovation in phases, and I chose to decide that we needed to renovate those buildings all at one time. So in January of '92, we started the renovation of that building to create an opportunity for a social model detox. Now, this social model detox was modeled after a previous program in Louisville that operated for 3 years called Project Connect. It was a 20-bed drop-in detox for men only. And the idea was that they would attract the men off of the street into the detox, let them sober up, and then connect them to community-based resources that they were eligible for and entitled to use. For that 3-year demonstration grant that ended in 1991, or ended at the end of 1990, they were literally full every day. All 20 beds were full 365 days a year for 3 years. Very, very successful in getting the men in and getting them, giving them an opportunity to detox, but their connect rate to outside resources was probably less, right around 10%. They just weren't able to get them in to actually commit to enter other community-based resources. So when the Healing Place decided to start the social model detox, we decided that what we needed was one-stop shopping. In other words, you attract the men into the overnight shelter, or you attract the men into the social model detox, and from there they'll go into a recovery program. And so that was the dream. That was the plan. The social model detox is merely our volunteer medical director, who happened to be Dr. Burns Brady, suggested that we allow the men and women who are coming into detox from all mind and mood altering substances, because we just weren't really sure whether their mental health diagnosis was accurate or not. So we decided to adopt the routine of detoxing the individual off of all mind and mood altering substances while they were in the detox. So in the early 1990s, 80% of the clients were addicted to alcohol, and the remaining 20% were addicted to cocaine and a little bit of crack, but as you can see today, it's changed considerably. The landscape has. So now we've got 29% using alcohol, but 32% using meth, and 26% using heroin or opiate addiction. Now, the heroin and opiate percentage includes fentanyl, but now it's getting a little more complicated because fentanyl is being laced in just about everything. You'll find fentanyl in meth, you'll find fentanyl in marijuana, you'll find fentanyl in spice, and so it's really getting difficult to sort out exactly what's happening relative to the substance. But we're still, alcohol is up there at 29%, still one of the most abused chemicals. And now the current trend now is meth, and you see heroin and opiate addiction tapering off. The neat thing about the healing place approach is that though our whole approach has been successful in addressing addiction rather than a specific drug. And our success rate has been consistent with whatever drug was currently being abused the most. So the model itself is not dependent on what drug it is being abused, rather how you change your behavior, change your life after you become clean from the chemicals. So that means that the model focuses on the individual, not the substances. One of the frustrating things I see in the world today is everyone gets focused on the drug itself, the opiate epidemic, and before that it was OxyContin, and before that it was cocaine, and it just goes on and on and on. And we recognize that yes, there's different drugs throughout the course of the history of addiction, but really it's the person and the addictive behavior that needs to be addressed. And so we developed a program to allow the individual to learn how to focus on self and learn how to make changes. And that's where we took a little bit of influence from a 12-step program, saying that we want a program of attraction rather than promotion. And this is where the peer mentors come into being. Now the formal term with training is called peer support specialists, but we called them peer mentors back in the late 90s, and they were the attraction. You can imagine, we have the saying that no alcoholic or addict can spend one day in a classroom with healing place clients, and their drinking and drugging history will be ruined for the rest of their lives. And the reason for that is that while they're sitting in that class, or they're looking at that peer that's an alumni that's standing up teaching that class, they'll identify with that peer, realizing, I knew that guy on the street and what a terrible addict he was, but look at him now. He's happy and joyous, and he's teaching us about addiction and brain chemistry, and man, how is that possible? So they decide, no, this is not for me, and they go back to the street. But what happens is it's not the fact that I cannot quit. It's now I don't want to. And that's a big mind flip for them to recognize, because they go back out on the street now, they don't have anyone to blame except themselves now. They've seen someone that's as alcoholic or addicted as they are, and yet that person has changed and is making positive lifestyle decisions and really enjoying that productive life. And so that's the whole key. The peers that have completed the program that are now teaching the classes, they are role modeling recovery, and through their actions and through recovery are the attraction or the hook. Because now they'll say, I want what he's got. I want to be able to enjoy life like he is. I'm going to make a commitment to do that. And so another concept coming out of the big book is that what the Healing Place took a serious look at the biological, psychological, social, and spiritual components of the whole person. So it really is a holistic approach to helping heal the whole body, body, mind, and spirit. And so, interestingly enough, in the biological approach, in the detox phase, by allowing the brain to detox from all mind and mood altering substances, we're letting the brain start to heal. Many men and women come to the detox with a label, a mental health label, bipolar or anxiety or depression. And we don't really know if that pre-existed before they started using substances, or as a result of using substances, they developed those mental health issues. And so Dr. Brady said, what we really need to do is figure out, let the brain detox and start to heal so we can start seeing the real person. And so if by chance there was a mental illness episode before they started using drugs and alcohol, then somewhere in the near term of their recovery journey, there'll be a mental health issue that might crop up, and we'll be able to deal with that and refer that individual out to get clinical help for it on a temporary basis to get them to come back in and complete the recovery program. Not only does the brain start to heal, but so does the body. It was like, while you're abusing alcohol and drugs, you kind of put your body to sleep. And it's amazing what the body can endure, what kind of damage it can endure while we're using alcohol and drugs. So as soon as we start detoxing and the brain becomes more clear, so does the body. And the body starts to wake up and say, hey, I need to get back into balance here. And I start identifying different chronic issues like probably hypertension or diabetes and that sort of thing. So we have a clinic that the doctors started and have continued to maintain. And so that clinic really triages the clients for chronic conditions and refers them out for medical care as needed. Additionally, I think one of the really neat things that we do in the biological approach is this, what we call healthcare and self-care. The healthcare is where we have the volunteer doctors, pharmacists, and nurses providing limited care for chronic conditions. But the self-care is what's really important, and that is educating the clients about they have to be their own patient advocate for themselves. They have the right to walk into a doctor's office and express their concerns and in detail, explain their symptoms and assert themselves as far as getting appropriate care. Most often, the alcoholic and addict doesn't use healthcare appropriately, and they don't really advocate for themselves. And so we spent, through the clinic staff, educate all of the clients on how to find a primary care physician and how to schedule appointments, how to follow up on lab work, all those kind of things that would seem routine, but it's not. And so they learn how to start doing that self-care. I mentioned that Healing Place is staffed by volunteer doctors, pharmacists, and nurses. We also have a relationship with the University of Louisville Medical School, which is really pretty cool. We have the junior class of the medical students come down, and throughout the year, they attend a community meeting and sit into a class and get a tour of the facility. And as a result of that, 10 or 12 of those medical students will want to volunteer to come back and participate in a medical student directed clinic, which would meet twice a week. And the doctors are the proctors for those medical students. And so it's really kind of neat where the medical student goes in and does their initial intake and then comes out and consults with the doctor, and they confer over the results of the intake and discuss treatment options. And then the medical student goes back in and explains the options to the client. So it's a win-win for the doctors to be able to train medical students, and it's a great opportunity for medical students to sit down and talk to alcoholics and addicts and get manipulated by alcoholics and addicts on what they want to get done as opposed to what really needs to be done. The other part of the self-care, healthcare part of it is the other thing, alcoholics and addicts, when their body starts to wake up and they have these aches and pains, naturally they want it fixed now. And they really don't understand the healthcare system, that medicine takes time, treatment takes time. You don't take an x-ray every week just to see if there's any changes. They have to be patient and let their body do the work. The body is a miracle machine that can do a lot of fantastic things, and the body just needs time to do that. And alcoholics and addicts become a little impatient about that. So we spend a lot of time helping them come down off the ledge and say, listen, it just takes a little bit of time. One of the chronic conditions that we deal with a lot, and that's hepatitis C, and to a lesser degree, HIV. And so we have a great connection with the community clinics for hepatitis and HIV. And so we have a significant population of clients with those illnesses, but they're getting great care. And we've been also running I would call it a support group for HIV and Hep C clients. Not a 12-step meeting per se, but a support group so they can gather together and share their experiences dealing with the disease and how to deal with it in a positive way. And as a result of that, we have seen men and women afflicted with hepatitis C use the principles of their recovery program and a good healthy lifestyle, healthy eating, drinking lots of water, a good spiritual program, literally have their viral load go to zero without any medical intervention. And it's really pretty amazing. So that healthcare and self-care is a big component of the recovery process for these men and women. The psychological approach, well, we try to help them find new ways to make decisions and solve problems and new way of thinking, because traditionally alcoholics and addicts are reactive rather than responding. Reactive meaning they just jump at the first solution rather than slowing down and figuring out several courses of action and responding to a situation. And we joke and say your best decisions have caused you to end up in a recovery program at the healing place. So maybe you need to think about a different way of making decisions. And of course, they all have their hangups on how they perceive things. They use their mind reading and as an excuse. They use it's got to be all or nothing, black or white. And so we help them deal with those kind of thinking distortions. For a long time, we were using a 12-step curriculum for more than probably 15 years or more. And it was a very didactic lecture, very structured. And one of the peer support men or women would stand up and pretty much read off the text for the lesson. All great information, all big book foundation with training aids. I mean, it's really excellent work. But after a while, we had several alumni come back and say, you know, what we need to do is to bring that curriculum up into the 21st century, talk about drugs, talk about women more, make it a little more friendly as far as allowing discussion. And so they sat down and spent, a good year rewriting the whole curriculum, making it into a conversational curriculum where you would put out open-ended questions and generate discussion, and then use examples. And this was all done by the peer support specialists as well. Occasionally, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes if someone had a mental health situation that was identified before they started using drugs or alcohol, and they had an emotional breakout 2 or 3 months, along with maybe with their post-acute withdrawal symptoms, we would certainly do an assessment. And then because we've got tremendous community resources for mental health, we would refer those individuals out to that community mental health resource and let them do what they needed to do to help that individual, and then have that person come back to the healing place to continue the recovery program. As a professional, I believe that I would really like to do any kind of mental health counseling and therapy. I'd really like to be working with someone who's at least a year sober. That way I know that they're going to be fairly stable in their recovery. They've got a good support group and sponsor. And as they get into some of the mental health therapy issues, you're not worried about them being at high risk for relapse. So really want them to complete a 12-step program to get a solid recovery foundation, so that when life stressors do hit, they don't resort to old behavior, but rather implement their recovery program of seeking out support from their support group and their sponsor. And so we really do everything we can at the Healing Place to encourage everyone to complete the program without not quitting before they finish. Again, we all know that the biggest challenge for alcoholics and addicts is connection. You can be in a room with 100 people and still feel all alone. And alcoholics and addicts feel unconnected. This peer-driven social model is all about connecting one alcoholic with another alcoholic. That's powerful. And it helps them to start learning how to reach out and trust people. On the street, trust lasts only as long as the alcohol or drug is present. When the alcohol or drug is gone, the trust is gone. And so when they get into recovery, they're hearing these slogans like, "This is a we program, and we have to help each other, and I'm my brother's keeper or my sister's keeper, and you know, we need to look out for each other, but it's scary. I don't know how to trust people." And so they, on their early days in sobriety, are learning how to reach out and trust, build that level of trust. Excuse me. And that's important because you won't really share your deepest, darkest secrets until you've got a relationship of strong trust. And that takes time to build. And the whole Healing Place model is designed to build that trust and build a sense of community. And every level of the program, whether it's in the residential program or the outpatient program, it's all about building that community and recognizing you're in a community of sorts. One of the challenges that therapists face with the alcoholic or addict is keeping them focused on the solution. And we at the Healing Place constantly remind everyone that everyone in this program is suffering from the same problem, but also enjoys the same solution. And we need to, as a result of that, we don't need to focus on the differences of each of us, but rather focus on the unity. We draw clients from all over the Commonwealth of Kentucky and out of state, actually, all the way. We've even had some from California come directly to the Healing Place. And what I mean by that is that it's a cultural melting pot of every kind of culture you can imagine, from every walk of life. And so the easiest way to create that community is to have them all focus on the fact that they're all alcoholics and addicts, and their one purpose in life is to learn how to stay sober. Focusing on the solution and not on the differences. We do use the therapeutic community meeting model of the community meeting Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9 o'clock. And that community meeting is to address behavior. And it's a real challenge to get the mindset change from snitching on my brother to actually recognizing that if I don't reach out and help my brother, I am condemning him to death, because this addiction kills. And if I'm not willing to take a risk and reach out and help my brother and express a concern for his behavior, then all I'm doing is writing his death certificate. And so in that therapeutic community where that trust is beginning to be built, they start realizing that they need to help their brother by identifying inappropriate behavior that they see in that individual. Many times they'll say, I see my behavior in you, and that's why I'm confronting you. And I know that if I hadn't been able to change, I was going to end up dead. And that's why I'm wanting to reach out and help you. So it's really peers helping peers change their behavior and how to connect with the community as a whole. It's powerful. It's credible because the person being confronted is listening to the person who has made those very changes that he's being confronted with. And so there's instant credibility. They may not like the suggestions because it involves a lot of work, but at the same time, they recognize that I can't think of one person, well, there might have been one in 30 years, one or two, but 99% of the men and women who got behavior contracts during that community meeting come back and say, I benefited from everything I was told to do. I benefited from everything I had to write. And that everything that I was asked to do was spot on addressing my character defects and shortcomings. So I really appreciate that therapeutic community model. And it's all about all those suggestions that were made to help that individual are all strength-based, all designed to emphasize and build on their characteristic, their strengths, and allow them to move forward in their recovery program. And of course, there's a saying that if you don't get the spiritual part of this program, you're not going to be able to stay sober. And so the clients come from all different cultures and all different experiences. Many of them believe that their concept of God or whatever has really not answered their calls and has kind of abandoned them. And so they automatically have a resistance to the concept of a higher power or a God. And so we work on creating a concept of the higher power that says, look at your addictive behavior and how you are still here struggling for recovery. Maybe there's something involved in your lifestyle that you haven't really taken account of, and that might be that spiritual connection. And so that spiritual connection really starts in detox, and then it continues on. We rely on the faith community to do their disciple making. We hope that they will come to our campus, the campuses, and take men and women to their place of worship, whatever that be, a synagogue or a mosque or a church or a temple or whatever, and do their disciple making on their turf. And that allows us to be able to stay without the influence of denomination and so forth. So we create that spiritual opportunity and then let the rest of the spiritual community do their work. So the healing place model is not that unique, really. What makes it unique is how it's all put together, how it's packaged. Because like I say, we do use cognitive behavioral therapy. We use behavior modification and motivational interviewing. But it's how it's all put together. And it's put together in such a way that we have the individuals go through a treatment protocol rather than an individual treatment plan. What I mean by that is that in an individual treatment program, you would tailor that treatment plan to meet the individual goals for that individual, the unique character defects and shortcomings that they might have, and really develop an individual treatment plan. Conversely, what we have at the healing place is a treatment protocol. In other words, everyone goes through the same process, through the same steps. And really that treatment protocol is going through the 12-step program, doing all the lessons and all the homework assignments for that 12-step recovery program. And it becomes an individual treatment program because each individual does that work at their own pace. And so that's what makes it individual. And there'll be hiccups along the way by individual. And that's when the peer support specialist, peer mentor will sit down and help that individual deal with that particular issue of disconnect or what have you, or whatever they're struggling with as far as even admitting they're powerless or that their life's been unmanageable. Then the peer support specialist, peer mentor will sit down and help them walk through that to recognize that. So that's the difference between the treatment protocol and the individual treatment plan. And like I said, we do use the evidence-based practices of the three models there. Again, the peer mentors, peer role models are the ones that teach the classes. They have instant credibility when they stand up and say, 6 months ago, I was sitting down in that chair where you're at now. And here's what I've learned about how I was able to deal with my anger, or here I was able to develop my spiritual journey. And then they share through the conference style presentations of how to do the 12 steps, relate their personal experiences to help the individuals understand. They do the classes on, decision making and feeling, do a lot of relapse prevention, and help them make their learn how to make better and stronger decisions. The model is really structured to be flexible to meet the client's needs. A couple of things that have happened because of the opiate epidemic. First of all, we with the advent of Vivitrol, we realized that Vivitrol, being a non-mind and mood altering substance, would certainly be a great tool for the opiate addicts to be able to stabilize them. The reason we needed to stabilize them is because they would finish the normal detox time would be 3 to 5 days for the alcoholic, maybe a little bit longer for meth. But for that opiate addict, we're looking at 12 to 15 days of detox. And then still, that was not enough, because when they started going through the recovery program, they were leaving left and right, and we couldn't keep them in the program. We're trying to figure out what in the world is wrong. Well, here's an example of the clients coming to the healing place saying, man, this is what you need to do. And they say, what you need to do is when they come out of detox, you need to have them restricted to property for 2 weeks. Don't let them go out and head to an outside classroom. Let them stay restricted to property. That way they can get grounded, continue some more detox up to 30 days, get familiar with the program, get to know some more people in the program before they're asked to walk to an outside classroom for a class on recovery. So it's amazing how the clients will continue to, as they change, they will tell you through action, if not words, how the model needs to change. And that's one of the things about the model, the healing place model, is alcoholics and addicts are really good at figuring out loopholes, how to get around something so they don't have to do it. And the whole idea of the healing place model is we just massage the model, figure out how to plug that loophole for now, and sure enough, down the road, another loophole will pop up. But again, that's meeting that client where the client is at and providing a service and a program that meets their needs on an individual basis. Behavior modification is really the core of this model. You can give them the information on addiction and brain chemistry and how the drugs work and that sort of thing, but you really need to have some physical examples of why behavior has to change. The first is to create, like I said, it becomes readily apparent that the healing place is a safe place to make a mistake. You make a mistake at the healing place, and you wouldn't, you would just learn from it. You would be able to figure out what you did wrong and so forth. But if you make that same mistake out on the street, you probably get killed. So that's why the healing place is a safe place to make changes. And we're dealing with a younger population now, 18 to 25-year-olds, significant heroin or opiate addicts. And so we're doing habilitation. I mean, they've not held a job, they've not had any responsibility or accountability. And so through this whole process of behavior modification, they're learning that every action has a consequence. The idea, alcoholics and addicts will create a situation while they're in their addiction phase, but the consequence for that event won't happen until further down the road, time-wise, maybe a month later or 2 months later. And then they have that consequence for that behavior they did 2 months previous, but they can't connect the two. And so all of a sudden they're saying, why is God punishing me now for, well, I didn't do anything today for this consequence, because now they can't connect that consequence with that behavior. So the healing place does everything they can to create an environment where you have an action, you have a consequence. Now, if you have a good action, you get a good consequence, such as maybe a reward or acknowledgement of that good action. Not so good action, not so good consequence. And so they start realizing that every action has a consequence. And so therefore they become more acutely aware of their behavior. Another thing is that we have very limited rules at the healing place model. There's only 5 rules. There's no violence, if threats of violence, no sexually acting out, no using drugs or alcohol, no racism, and no gambling. Violate any one of those particular rules, and you'll be immediately discharged with the option of coming back and reapplying to the program. Now, are there informal structure rules, informal actions? Yes, absolutely. But those are informal in that you have to ask somebody. If you don't know what to do or how to do something, you need to reach out and ask someone in the program what to do. And if you get a good answer from the person that really has the right answer, you'll get a good consequence from that. But if you get a bad answer from that individual, you're going to find out you just made a mistake. So it's important to learn how to ask the right question to the right person. And that's all part of learning how to build relationships, how to learn how to build trust. I do have one question that says, do the behavior changes tend to be around substance abuse? Actually, the whole concept of peer-to-peer or behavior modification can apply to any individual that needs to change behavior. It's mental health, diabetes, cancer. They're all looking for ways to change behavior. And so that peer-to-peer, peer role modeling, that's why you're going to see support groups for the different diseases and support groups for the different chronic diseases as well, because it's all about learning what, well, here's the other part of it. And it's so true that alcoholics and addicts would change anything and everything to get out of that pain and misery, but they don't know what to change. And unfortunately, if they did know what to change, they don't know how to change it. And so that's the power of this peer-to-peer model. Someone who's actually made a change in a character defect is able to reach out and share how they've been able to change that particular character defect and give prime examples. And that other person listening will say, yeah, okay, I can understand that. And the way that that works is that the person giving the suggestion doesn't confront the individual and say, hey, you've got a bad problem with anger. Because the minute you confront someone like that, confront someone, they put up their defenses. And what you want to do is create an atmosphere where they might listen to you. So what you do is say, hey, let me tell you about my anger problem and how I had to deal with it. And these are the tips that I was given on how to calm down and count to 100 and stop and calm my heart down so I can actually start hearing, because when I get angry, I can't hear you. Those are the kind of things that you're going to get from your peer-to-peer role modeling, whether it's any chronic disease, addiction, or what have you. Is we want to change. Well, and even in a Sunday school program, Sunday school group, you're confronted by a fellow peer that says, you know, this is what I had, this is the problem I've had, and this is how I've been able to deal with it. So that peer-to-peer is very, very powerful. It's not solely for the substance abuser that needs that peer support. There's a lot of community groups out there that use that peer support. So because we're doing habilitation rather than rehabilitation, all the clients in the programs have a small task to do. That helps keep the operation costs running of the shelter. And they'll do everything from laundry to housekeeping to kitchen, cooking the meals, landscaping, and so forth. But really the focus is allowing the individual to assume responsibility for a task and then be willing to be held accountable for that. On the street, there's no accountability, no responsibility. But now they're going to learn, I do have responsibility to do this task every day, and I'm going to be held accountable if I don't do it. And so we have sayings, a lot of cliches around like to be on time is to be late, to be early is to be on time, things like that. Just teaching basic work skills. You get up, the first thing you do when you get up in the morning is make your bed. Second thing you do is line up your shoes. Third thing you do is organize your clothes closet. Then you empty your trash around your bed. Then you go down for breakfast. Just routine things that normally they have forgotten all about or didn't learn it in the first place. And all of that is establishing that foundation. And I have to laugh because I will see alumni of 20 years sober or more, and they'll still talk about the first thing they do is get up and make their bed. Motivational interviewing is another part of the peer support specialist, peer mentor role, in that keeping the client focused on completing the 12-step program by helping them prioritize issues and be able to help them sit down and decide what really needs to be worked on now and what can really wait till later, because we want to keep them focused on completing the program. The peer mentors, peer support specialists, peer mentors will also address apathy or ambivalence to the program. There's also a obvious phenomena happening when you have a client that's just completed one assignment and is pushing to get the next assignment, and it is supposed to be a week or two before he gets that assignment, but he's harassing the peer specialists saying, I want that lesson right now, I want to get it done, I want to get it done. And what will happen at that point is the peer support specialist or peer mentor will recognize this person needs to slow down, this person needs to sit a while and rethink what he just completed and maybe do some pontificating and sharing and studying on what he had just learned, rather than pushing to get the next assignment and trying to go too fast. On the other hand, we'll have someone who will sit on a step work assignment for a week or longer and come up with all kinds of excuses as to why they can't get it done. And that's when the peer support specialist, peer mentor will turn the heat up and say that you need to move on. You're procrastinating. You actually have to get the work done. And they work on, peer support specialist supervisors work on short-term solutions like family issues and integrating back into the family, recognizing that the family may not be receptive to this new recovering person coming back into the family life. A significant percentage of the clients have legal issues, but really all they need is a plan of action to start resolving those legal issues. The same with financial issues, just a plan of action and so forth. So really flexible on being able to model a protocol that meets the individual needs, along with the pace at which they go through the 12-step recovery program. And that pretty well sums up the highlights of the model. Okay, it's frozen. Next. What is that? I need the last screen. It's frozen. Oh, there we go. Nope, there we go.
At the very bottom.
There we are. Yeah, unlocked.
Oh.
Thank you, Libby. So way back in the beginning, I said it was efficient, effective, and replicable. When we started back in 1991 with 100 beds, the cost was less than $25 per person per day to provide everything. You name it, everything. Today, 32 years later, the budget has grown from $300,000 to over $10 million. And we have 1,000 clients in beds every day. Cost is still less than $33 inflation. So it's less than $33 a day. That's why the cost per day makes this model very efficient and maximum use of resources. The effectiveness is that, as it points out here, 1 out of 4 clients, it's their first time ever in a detox environment. And the other 3 out of the 4 have spent at least 1 or more times in detox or in other treatment programs. So this model is a resource for those who have multiple relapses because we have open access, and it doesn't matter how many times you come to the healing place, you keep coming until you finally are able to complete the recovery program. Last year, over 8,000 clients walked through the doors of detox and overnight. And if you translate that into having them go through any of the various residential or outpatient services programs, one out of 4 complete the program. As far as replication, we've had it replicated in like 15 rural communities in Kentucky, 100 bed facilities, 100 beds. Each facility is 1 facility for men, 1 facility for women, and they've been replicated in 3 other states. And that's the highlights of, and you can read the book.
Fantastic. Well, Jay, I had a couple of questions.
Okay.
And I have to say, as a preface, that I find a lot of parallels between my experience at Share and what you describe at the Healing Place. We opened our doors in January of '93, so in a similar time frame. And we also use a lot of the strategies that you talk about here, although we don't have, it's not a homeless shelter. It's more of a drop-in center, but we definitely relate to a lot of the strategies and approaches that you're using. One thing that I've noticed that's challenging for the staff at Share, and I wonder if it's challenging for Healing Place staff, is this sense, this fear that they are enabling people because the approach is gentle, because the approach is loving and unconditional. Sometimes people feel like, well, if you really want to get abstinent, you're going to need to have some tough love. You're going to need to have consequences. And I just wonder how the Healing Place addresses this internal dilemma that can come up as we're working on our own recovery process, and we may have benefited from consequences that we received. And yet in the work that we're delivering, we're working hard to include people, to see them in a positive light, to be very gentle in the way that consequences are delivered. I'm just wondering if that comes up for you.
I think if you ask any of our alumni, they would not say that their consequences were easy or gentle. From this aspect, it starts with the understanding that if I don't change, I'm going to die. That's the basic beginning premise. So if that's the case, then I have got to help my brother recognize his character defects are his problems. And so the way to do that is not in an adversarial, forceful, harsh way. It's through, listen, we also have the saying, I'm going to love you to life. I'm not going to love you to death. I'm going to love you to life. And through that, I'm going to love you to life through the consequences. That unconditional love does not mean that it's soft, but it's honest. I mean, it directly to the core, because the Alcoholics Anonymous will say to each other, I know you, but I don't know you. And what they're saying is, I don't know you, all your details and so forth, but I know you as an alcoholic or addict, and I know how you manipulate. I know how you con. I know how you have these different character defects because I've had the same ones. And so in this community meeting, the definition of the community meeting is the purpose of the community meetings is to give people the opportunity to be responsible for themselves and to one another in a caring environment. This is done by sharing concerns with each other when they arise and or in community meetings when necessary. What that means is, as you see your brother doing an inappropriate behavior, you confront them one-on-one and you hope that they listen. But he continues in the behavior. So 2 or 3 of you will confront the brother for the same reason, for the same behavior, and he still doesn't change. Then he gets the opportunity in the circle of community for all the assembled people in that program, where he will get that mirror held up to his face by everyone, those who are willing to share with that individual. This is what you're doing. This is what's inappropriate. This is how you've been manipulative. And some of the consequences are pretty significant, as far as a lot of extra work in working in the kitchen or doing other jobs around the shelter or around the program. A lot of writing, a lot of introspective writing, a lot of writing on first things first, writing about the steps, a lot of letters of apology to family members. Of course, those are never shared, but they are actually have required to write those kind of things. So those consequences are hard. They're forcing that individual to get in touch with their feelings. They're forcing that individual to write those down and to get serious about taking a look at the behavior that they were exhibiting and how to change that behavior, and all of those writings and all that extra work, and going down to visiting detox and sharing your story with those men that are just coming off the street. That's hard, but those are all ways, and it's a tough love in that you're forcing them to take a look at themselves that they never were willing to do before.
Absolutely.
Jay, if I could add, also too, Libby, a lot of the accountability it doesn't rest on the shoulders of the staff or the peers. A lot of it, or the peer mentors or the peer staff, that comes from your other brothers and sisters in the program. The first job, I am an alumni, and so the first job in phase 1 is working in the kitchen, and you're feeding breakfast, lunch, and dinner. At that time, Jay, I think it was 350 people.
Wow.
And it was lunchtime, and I am serving, except I have a problem minding my own business. And so I thought it was my responsibility to kind of turn around and help and guide and direct and manage the guy that was cooking, because there were 3 of us on a team, 1 serving, 1 cooking, and then another washing dishes. And one of the guys banged on the window. Well, a gentle knock. He's like, "Man, you've got this line backed up out the door. Stay focused on what you're doing." And so, it doesn't rest solely on the peers. And in that, as a peer mentor to role model recovery, a lot of that is just simply reminding the residents what their responsibility is. And, going back to what Jay was talking about before, my brother or sister, what you're saying or doing could really be detrimental to your recovery. And asking some questions, and just simply asking if, after having a conversation, whether or not something is appropriate or inappropriate. And there are situations where the individual will say, "Yeah, that's inappropriate, and I'll hold myself accountable in the next community meeting." Or and it worked both ways with me through the process. There were times when I was unwilling to hold myself accountable and couldn't see what they were saying, and they held a concern, a loving concern. "Tony, this could be really detrimental to you and also to the rest of us in this community." And it's just a lot of reminding, also to the residents, that the clients that you guys agreed to. We have a set of guidelines like the points that Jay mentioned, and that as a member of this social model, do you accept these following responsibilities? And you all said yes. So here comes the teaching.
That's beautiful. I love it. My guess is that it may be hard for people in the outer community to understand this intervention. I'm wondering how does the Healing Place handle neighbor relations with the community, so that people can understand what's happening?
One of the best ways for us to go is to go to a neighborhood association meeting and bring a couple of our alumni and let them tell their story, especially if those alumni came from that neighborhood. And there's nothing more powerful than that alumni standing up and saying, I used to live here. I used to use drugs behind your house. And here's what I went through when I went to the Healing Place. And here's what the Healing Place taught me how to change my life. And now I'm giving back. And the other part of it is the best way for people to see the spirit of the Healing Place is to come to that community meeting, that 1 hour meeting 3 days a week, where they sit in a circle and they hold each other accountable for inappropriate behavior. I've had CEOs from businesses come out of that meeting saying, man, that was the most powerful meeting I've ever been in. I wish I could get my company to have a meeting like that. And I'm so impressed with the Healing Place. I'm going to tell, I can't get involved, but I'm going to tell everybody about what a great program this is. The other visitor that comes out of that meeting says, man, that's the greatest meeting I've ever been in. How can I get involved? And so it's not about eliminating the ignorance by having them come and actually see and participate in that community meeting and interact with the clients. And they'll see all ages, all walks of life, all experienced, all different experiences. They're all working together as one, supporting each other. It's powerful.
That's amazing. I love it. I think to myself about the people I know, and we have a community meeting that, I think that the kind of community that we're working to form at Share is much more sort of loose-ended, and we don't ask people to commit to a certain set of values. It's not a residential program.
Right.
We work with a lot of people that might be active in their addiction, or they might not. They might have a mental health issue, or they might not. They may be receiving services, or they may not. And so when we hold our community meetings, just having some communication is really kind of our goal. If we can help the community begin to establish community norms, that is where we begin to see that people find it easier to change behavior. Because I so agree with what Jay, you were saying earlier in your presentation, where as soon as I'm starting to lay down the law or say, you have to do this or you have to do that, it just doesn't work. So what we're trying to work towards is helping people experience what it's like to be part of a community. Because the people that we're serving, and it sounds like you're serving pretty similar population that has been kind of excluded from the human family and told that they're not part of and that they're not welcome.
Right.
And we're trying to have a message of, there's value in every human being. Come and be part of what we're doing here, and let's try and make it work. And the challenges are many to that approach. We're not requiring abstinence or even a commitment to abstinence necessarily. What we're trying to do is create a space where people can feel that sense of connection and acceptance that they may not be getting anywhere else. And sometimes it's hard to explain our methods to people from the outside, who are like, what are you doing with all these addicts all over here?
No, you can't talk to a dead addict.
There you go.
You've got to have a place where they can assemble and where they feel trusted, where they feel safe. And through that role modeling, they'll start to realize, yes, I can trust you and I can trust that person.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because as a part of our program of attraction rather than promotion. Our alumni showcase that behavior all the time. We've got council members and judges and police officers that comment all the time about they remember this person as a adversarial person, but now they've changed and they're positive role models in the community. When I talk to CEOs and presidents of companies, I talk about return on investment. That's the language they understand. And the return on investment is if you invest in the healing place, or if you invest in share, what you're going to get is you're going to have someone come out of there who's going to be a contributing member of the community, who's going to be a role model, who's going to be positive, who's going to show up every day, who's going to give you 8 hours of work. That's what you're going to get if you invest into the healing place or similar models like that. So, and our outpatient program is just the same as our residential program as far as the same spirit, the same accountability as the residential program.
Well, I think the Healing Place is really lucky to have you as an ally and a proponent and someone who can speak to the benefits of your work. And, I think it's so important that in order to serve stigmatized people, we have to help people see what that is, what that's about. So it's not just them, us against them,
Right.
with really all of us together in this community. And, we always look for those opportunities to partner. Let's say we have an incident and the police get called out. Well, that's when I'm taking out my business card and I'm saying, we want to work with you. Bring us the people that you're finding it hard to work with, and we'll try and help them find the resources they need here. We had someone, there's police officers brought in somebody who had run out of his medication. We helped him get his medication. They brought in a teenager who had gotten kicked out of the house in Texas and took the bus to LA and had nowhere to go. And they just kind of dropped this teenager off and we helped him get some housing. We try to see ourselves as partners with the community because we recognize that with a place doing the kind of work that we do, it's not always going to be smooth. There's going to be some conflict. There's going to be some issues. But overall, our end goal is to solve problems for law enforcement, not to create more, and to try to find a place for people to land so that they can have a stepping stone to their next step. It's difficult work, though. I really applaud the work that you're doing at the Healing Place, that, the people at the Healing Place, you have their back. And I think that's really evident.
Well, I think that's what you're doing at the drop-in center too. When I said we only had those 5 rules, and there's a lot of informal rules.
Yeah.
What that does is allows them to break that rule and then be held accountable for that rule, but in a loving way, and saying, here's what you need to do next time. Not kicked out, not punished, not, lose privileges or anything. And when you do that in that drop-in center, they'll all of a sudden say, hey, they really care about us. We can make mistakes and learn from them and not get thrown out, where in another environment, they'd probably get thrown out.
I loved the short rule list. Let me tell you Cher's short rule list. Here's our rules. Cher is an alcohol-free, drug-free, gambling-free, smoke-free safety zone. That's our whole list.
We didn't throw in smoking.
We put it in there because smoking kills. That's what Bill W. died of.
I know.
It's a really big issue in the recovery community, and we have nicotine anonymous meetings, and so we need to make it safe for non-smokers as well. So it's not, we're not forbidding anybody from smoking, but it's also California law that you can't smoke inside any public facility. So
but they'll use that as an alibi that I can only quit one addiction at a time.
Well, and of course, I think if you were to choose, I think it's probably more important to be strategic about it. An opiate overdose can end your life much more quickly than smoking a cigarette, obviously. But that doesn't mean that.
We do have smoking cessation classes here, and we do encourage them to quit smoking, and they're making progress.
All right. Well, let's give Jay a hand. It's a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much, Jay.
Thank you all.
Really enjoyed it. And Jay, I hope that you'll share your slides with us. I know people are going to be asking for them.
Yep.
And that way we can spread the word about the Healing Place and your book. Sounds like a wonderful book.
My oversight, I will do that very shortly.
Okay, fantastic.
Thank you.
All right, well, I'm going to stop recording now